to talk seriously about the
Do you think?
Holocaust?
I do actually. I do, because I just find it extraordinary that you would think the Holocaust could ever be something that we could joke about.
Why, too soon?
Prominent conservative in America has to say about Adolf Hitler. Now, what do you mean by Hitler is very fucking cool? Because I think he's very fucking a monster.
Okay. That's a clip. I think he's very fucking a monster. Do you hear yourself?
Yeah,
I mean,
do.
can we all grow up?
I do.
Can we all grow up?
He murdered 12
that is
million people. He murdered 12 million people. What is very fucking cool about that? Tell me.
The edits, it's just cool. The uniforms, the parades, it's cool as a guy. You look at World War II and it's fascinating and it's interesting and it's
Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about the hilarious Nick Fuentes Piers Morgan interview. I sort of want to break down why Piers Morgan ended up looking sort of ridiculous, even though many of the clips and things Piers Morgan pointed out that Fuentes said were not the best things, not the greatest things, but he still ended up looking foolish because he's a boomer and he doesn't understand internet culture, and I sort of want to break that down. Also, Trump did an interview with Politico for some reason. It's so funny. Trump will criticize these media outlets, and then like 5 days later, he's doing like an interview with them. They say, Politico, you're garbage, you're terrible. The women reporters you hire are ugly, disgusting. And then he does an interview like 5 days later, like, oh, nothing, everything's fine. He didn't just, he'll be doing an interview with this same female reporter he insulted, and Trump's like, oh, nice to meet you. Nice to see you again. It's so ridiculous. We have a ridiculous president. I love him, but he's something else. But before we get into all of that, I want you to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the hell you listen to this amazing audio experience. I greatly appreciate it. So, yes, Nick Fuentes went on Piers Morgan's show. This has been in the making for a while now. Many people online have been pressuring and demanding that Piers Morgan put Nick Fuentes on Uncensored. I mean, Piers Morgan's YouTube show is literally called Uncensored. So if you want to live up to that name, platforming Nick Fuentes, something that you should do, right? I mean, that is part, you're uncensored. You should be able to have all types of conversations that are not censored. And Nick Fuentes has been one of the most censored men in U.S. politics in terms of the punditry. Maybe more censored than President Trump after January 6th, to be honest. I mean, the level of censorship was similar at the very least. So, but Fuentes, as he calls it, is on his generational run right now. And he's been going on all these podcasts. Patrick Bet-David, Tucker Carlson, all these different, Glenn Greenwald, all these platforms. And, he's become a central part of our politics now. There's no question about that, particularly on the right and the online right. President Trump was asked about Nick Fuentes because he had, Tucker Carlson had the audacity to interview Fuentes. And, Trump basically said that Tucker can interview whoever. That sort of put a lid, I think, on some of the pressure that was on Tucker. Because, Trump is still the leader of the Republican Party. He's still the central force on the right. So when he said that, I think some of the pressure backed off Tucker. But Fuentes is still under immense pressure because, the Israel firsters hate him still. They tried to destroy Fuentes' career before it even got started. Famously, if you're a Nick Fuentes fan or if you listen to any of these interviews, he's, gone into detail. I don't need to get into it all, but essentially, Ben Shapiro and people at the Daily Wire tried to strangle him in the crib when he was just starting. So he's been facing resistance for years now. But because I think in part Israel going crazy the last 3 years, the last 2-3 years, it created a situation for Fuentes to really rise. And given the fact that the right sort of got its mojo back the last year with Trump's election and wokeness dying, it made people more willing to hear out an individual like Nick Fuentes. So, yeah, Nick Fuentes, and he got, to his credit, Elon Musk, who Fuentes recently ratioed on X in a brutal way. But Elon Musk actually allowed him back on Twitter, now X, but at the time Twitter. And, Rumble's a platform funded by Peter Thiel, but Rumble is a free speech platform, For all its faults, the ads are ridiculous. I hate using Rumble just because of the ads. It's terrible. Terrible. But it allows people who have been censored, to have a show that can sustain oneself. And Fuentes is very popular on Rumble. He's one of the most popular Rumble streamers on the platform. Certainly, in terms of popularity on the young side. I mean, many people on Rumble, I would imagine, are older leaning, but I think Fuentes' audience is clearly young. So he probably has the most young viewers on Rumble, and it's probably not even close. So you can't deny that Fuentes is extremely popular, whether you like him or dislike him. He's extremely influential. Just go on Instagram, you'll see reels. I mean, I'll see friends who I would not assume like Fuentes, and I'll see that they've liked reels of Fuentes going on one of his ridiculous rants or stuff like that. Get back to work, Matt Walsh. Those type of clips. Get back to work. You must support Israel. That type of stuff. And it's funny. He's very funny. Whether you like Fuentes, whether you don't like him, he's extremely funny. He's very talented. I'm not just glazing him. I'm making a point here. He's very talented. And so it's hard to resist his prominence, and especially because a lot of the controversy surrounding Fuentes right now is the fact that, Trump's not going to be the Republican nominee in 28. For the first time in, 12 years, we're going to have someone who's not Donald Trump representing the Republican Party on the presidential ticket. And you're already starting to see battle lines being drawn between different factions within the Republican Party, within the conservative movement. There's already been reports, as I discussed over the weekend, that Ted Cruz is seriously considering a presidential bid, running as, I guess, the pro-Israel candidate. Good luck with that. But there is, you have sort of traditional conservative Inc., the Republican establishment, who would like to push the Republican Party back to a traditional conservative way and against, away from Trump's populism. Now, Fuentes is not necessarily a populist. It's debatable. I mean, he's more of a reactionary. And, particularly on the right, there is a lot of crossover between, reactionary individuals' rhetoric and populist rhetoric in policy to some extent. But I wouldn't say he's a populist, and that's part of the reason I'm not, I'm the right-wing populist. And yes, there is crossover, but that's why I've never been in love with Fuentes, because fundamentally I don't think he's a populist. I think he's a reactionary. And, that's fine. I'm not people on the left or college campuses, they hear the word reactionary, they think Hitler, Nazis. I don't necessarily think that. Sometimes, being a reactionary is appropriate when you have ridiculous, left-wing social propaganda being pushed on people and ridiculous, social standards being pushed. I can understand that. And when you have immigration totally destroying the makeup of a country, I don't think it's racist to, think that's problematic, depending on exactly your motivation, but I don't think it's inherently I don't think it's inherently bad. Look, you can call it whatever. You want to call that racist, fine. Call it whatever the hell you want. I don't think it's unreasonable, and I don't think it's racist, but I digress. So I say all this to make the point, you have Fuentes going on Piers Morgan, and, I'm not a big fan of Piers Morgan's show. I've never been a big fan of Piers Morgan. I think he's just sort of obnoxious. I'm not a fan of the British accent. I think it's sort of gay. It's some of the worst accents is sort of the Cali white girl accent, the flamboyantly gay accent, and then I would say the British, I'm smart because I sound like this accent. And then you have the foreign accent when you can't understand the fucking person because they've been living in the country for 40 years and they can barely speak English. I don't like that accent either, but I digress. So Piers Morgan is, but you know what? His show has become very popular though on YouTube, and it's probably better than what you'll get on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News because he does have more controversial guests on, like Fuentes. Finally, so it's a better program. There's less commercials, it seems to me, as someone who's watched the show, so the discussions do get to be aired out more. He still does the whole panel format with many of these shows, which I think panels are so fucking stupid. Luckily with Fuentes, it was just, them one-on-one, so that was good. But panels are lame. But, Piers Morgan has Fuentes on finally after all this pressure on Piers. And, Piers Morgan, he likes ratings. That's obvious. And he knows what makes good television, what makes a good show. So, him having Fuentes on, especially when it became more socially acceptable for Piers Morgan to have him on, that's the other thing. Again, the show's called Uncensored, but he doesn't have Fuentes on until other people start having him on. When it becomes, like I said, more socially acceptable, people like Tucker having him on, Patrick Bet-David, Glenn Greenwald, all these different podcasts. It's not until then when Piers is like, okay, I can have him on. Please don't get mad at me. These other people had him on, so you can't get mad at me, my funders or whoever the hell funds him. I'm sure it's some shady businessman. I digress. So he has Nick Fuentes on, and Piers does the normal Piers Morgan thing, sort of what he did with Andrew Tate, except Nick handled it better. He starts playing clips and reading out of context statements of stuff Nick has said over the years. And as I played at the beginning of the podcast, that was just a few examples. There was many more. And, it's basically gotcha journalism. It's sort of shallow. Piers is better than this. He brings up Nick Fuentes' dad and, a joke that Fuentes made about his dad and his family when growing up about not going to certain restaurants if they were owned by black people or, they were dined by black people. People went to these businesses disproportionately. And it is sort of a low blow because, his dad isn't there. He's not a public figure. And, Piers made the point saying that, that Nick told the story first on his platform. So he's the one who made it public. And that's true, but I do think there's a difference between someone's son making a passing joke about his dad versus a quote-unquote journalist. If you want to call him a journalist, I call him a retard, but you can call him a journalist. A journalist, quote-unquote, talking about this guy's dad that he's interviewing him with just based off a clip that's out of context, a statement that's out of context. He didn't even play the clip. And it's that is sort of a low blow because his dad is not a public figure. Just because you're a public figure and you tell stories about your parents doesn't mean your parents are a public figure. That doesn't necessarily mean it's fair game. And Piers Morgan was trying to make the point, well, this may be why you're racist because maybe your parents were racist. It's okay, man. What are you, you're like a psychiatrist? You're a psychologist? Nick Fuentes, this is a political show. Fuentes is a political figure. He's a very prominent political figure now. Why are you trying to psychoanalyze him? I don't know. It's just weird. I don't know. It's not the only that's not the only thing Piers was asking that had nothing to do with politics. He asked Fuentes if he was gay. By the way, what is it with older men who slightly lean conservative asking these young 20-something-year-olds about their sexuality? It's a little weird. It's like when you get the young 19-year-old intern and you start asking questions of whether or not he has a girlfriend or not. And if he's attractive and he doesn't have a girlfriend, it's sort of ooh, what's this about? Not that I've done that, but I'm just, not that I've done that. I'm just saying. I've seen this move before. When you have these older men sort of prying about these young 19, 18-year-old, 20-or-something-year-old men about their dating life. It's first off, Nick Fuentes isn't gay. There's no evidence that he's gay. And who gives a shit? I don't care. Who cares? I mean, I guess, if it did come out that Fuentes was gay, it'd be sort of hilarious, given everything Fuentes has said about gay people. And, he's had some interesting experiences with cat boys, but I digress. But who cares? You have Nick Fuentes on. He's on a generational run. And he's talking about controversial topics, things like Israel, immigration, etc. The failures of the Trump administration or the so-called failures of the Trump administration. And you're going to go asking him if he's gay and talk about his dad. It's what? I'm sorry, that is lame. I mean, you could defend it or not defend it, but it is kind of lame. And again, he starts asking about the Holocaust and everything, and about Hitler, and it's what did you expect Fuentes to do? If you know anything about Fuentes, he's not going to oh, I'm sorry for saying that, and I don't mean it anymore. It's he's either going to own it as a joke, or he's going to own it as something he believes, and he's not going to back down. So instead of making him look like a fool by doing all these gotcha questions, you make him look like a badass and someone who's not, someone who's willing to he's not going to step down. He's not going to back off. He's going to stand by what he said. That makes him look strong, not weak. Playing clips that are out of context, whether they're vulgar or not, that's not gonna make people turn away from him if he's not gonna back off. That made him look strong. I mean, you could hear it in the clips. He's making jokes. I mean, Fuentes is more smart than Piers Morgan. There's no question about that. Just watch the interview, you can see. I mean, Piers isn't dumb, but he was a little bit lazy in this interview, I thought. And I'm not even against Fuentes, but I would have liked to see a tougher interview. Many of these interviews with Fuentes, some of the more prominent ones, he doesn't get a ton of pushback, which is sort of telling in its own right. But, I thought Piers, because, Tucker didn't push back, Patrick David didn't push back, Glenn Greenwald didn't push back. These podcasters haven't been pushing back. I knew Piers would push back, but I thought he would do more effectively. I was hoping he wouldn't do this gotcha bullshit. I was hoping it'd be more of an intellectual conversation, and maybe I shouldn't have assumed that because we're talking about Piers Morgan, intellectualism. I don't know. I guess I was naive. Again, the voice, it tricks you. It really does trick you. You're like, oh, this guy, good sir. The whole British accent, it really does tricks the American brain. I don't know if it's going back to our deep-seated roots who want to be ruled by a king as Americans, the settlers. I don't know. It really does play tricks on you. But Piers Morgan didn't do a good job. And again, it shows it's like, yeah, if you're like 40 and above and you hear some of these clips about Fuentes making jokes about the Holocaust, you're going to be turned off by that. But if you're younger, particularly in your 20s or you're a teenager, they're just jokes. Like, young people, to their credit, understand the distinction between jokes and making serious political commentary. And most of the time, younger people, and I'm in my 20s, we can tell when someone's making a joke versus a serious point. And I guess, but older people can't, or they refuse to. So the interview was hilarious. It was pretty telling. It sort of shows how shallow Piers Morgan really is. And again, it shows how talented Fuentes is. He handled the interview very well. He owned up. He didn't back off his statements, which is good. And yeah, the generational run continues. And again, I'm not the biggest fan of his. I've been critical of him on my podcast, but you got to give him credit. He doesn't back down. He owns, for the most part, he will own up what he says. Sometimes I think he's a little disingenuous about what was a joke, what wasn't a joke. But at the end of the day, I'm not in his head. I don't know. Generally speaking, I will give him the benefit of the doubt. And again, the interview was hilarious. I played a few clips, but watch the whole thing. It's on YouTube, other platforms. I recommend it. Let's get into the last topic.
Your team has been going back and forth between Putin and Zelensky with various drafts of a peace deal. Which country right now is in the stronger negotiating position?
Well, there can be no question about it. It's Russia. It's a much bigger country. It's a war that should have never happened. Frankly, it wouldn't have happened if I were president, and it didn't happen for 4 years. I watched that taking place, and I said, wow, they're going to cause some problems here. And it started, and it could have evolved into World War III, frankly. I think it's probably not going to be happening now. I think if I weren't president, you could have had World War III. I think you would have had a much bigger problem than you have right now. But right now, it's a big problem. It's a big problem for Europe, and they're not handling it well.
So the last thing I want to talk about, sort of quickly, is a little bit of an update on the Ukraine-Russia peace talks. Back around Thanksgiving and a little bit prior, there was seemingly real momentum to get some sort of a peace deal signed or agreed to, even by Thanksgiving or certainly by Christmas. It looks like talks have stalled a little bit. And Trump did an interview with Politico. I just played the clip. And, Trump didn't seem too optimistic about it. Throughout the interview, he talked about it more than what I played, obviously. And, his rhetoric is pretty good right now on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He's pretty much making it clear that the holdup in these peace negotiations really is Europe and really Ukraine. He didn't say it outright, although he criticizes Zelensky for apparently not reading these peace deals. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it's true, it's pretty telling, and you could tell that Trump's getting really frustrated by Ukraine. And as you heard in the clip, Trump makes the point that Russia's winning the war. They have the advantage. They're a much bigger country. They have much more weapons. They are a nuclear power. I believe they have the most nuclear weapons of any other country in the world. So they were always going to win this war. They were always going to have the advantage. And didn't matter how much that Europe and our former retarded president Joe Biden, didn't matter how much money and weapons they were going to give Ukraine. Fundamentally, they don't have the cards, as Trump would say. You don't have the cards. The cards don't exist. You don't have them. You don't have the cards. Tremendous. So they were always going to lose. Now, I will say this. Trump always says, and I believe you heard it in the clip, if this war wouldn't have happened if I were president, it wouldn't have happened. The election was rigged. If it wasn't rigged, this war wouldn't have happened, but it did happen because it was rigged. Terrible election, terrible war, make America great again. Trump always says basically that stuff. And it's like, okay, man, I get it. If you weren't president, this war wouldn't have happened. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But how about you put more pressure on the Europeans and Ukraine to get this peace deal done? You know, I get it, they're being difficult, and they're Europe, they're hopeless. I understand that. But you could put more pressure on them. One way to put more pressure is to stop sending weapons at all. I understand that the Europeans are paying for the weapons, but why even give them the weapons at all? You're still giving Ukraine what they ultimately need to stay alive in this conflict, which is leading to the deaths of more Ukrainians. So you could stop doing that. You don't have to keep this ridiculous war going. And I understand that Europe is apparently threatening the United States with different ways to try to influence us to keep the war going. You know, they're trying to threaten us with certain economic pressures, apparently. I mean, I don't know if the report was true, but it's like the audacity of the Europeans, who are so dependent on the United States militarily and otherwise, to like try to put pressure on us, this, you know, just because we're trying to help Ukraine here with this peace settlement. The longer this war goes on, the worse shape Ukraine's going to be in. We're trying to stop the bloodshed, and the Europeans and the Ukrainians are giving us shit for it. It's like, you guys are so ungrateful. You know, I had to deal with a friend recently who was super ungrateful. It's so draining. These European people are so ungrateful. Like, what is wrong with you people? We're trying to help Ukraine. We're trying to make sure that Russia doesn't, you know, take over the whole fucking country. And, you know, the gratitude we get, the quote-unquote gratitude, is just like them bitching about how the peace negotiations haven't been fair to the Ukraine so far. It's like, okay, Ukraine is losing, Russia's winning, whoever's winning the war gets to dictate the terms of peace. That's just the reality, folks. So, you know, Trump's rhetoric has been very good on the Ukrainian war lately, but, you know, with him, he could, you know, Trump the next day could be talking about how, you know, Ukraine could take back all their territory again, which he did a few months ago, which was insane. The other thing Trump mentioned in this interview, which I should have played the clip, but I didn't, was apparently Zelensky, when Zelensky became the president in 2019, you know, around the time of the perfect phone call, the famous phone call that led to the Trump's impeachment, his first impeachment, his first of two impeachments. Perfect phone call. Apparently, according to Trump at least, and, you know, take this for what you will, Zelensky told Trump that he wanted all of Crimea back, and that he wanted all these weapons even then, back in 2019, which, if that's true, that's insane. That just shows you how out of touch Zelensky is, and Ukraine is, and the Europeans are. That, you know, that was never going to happen. So, anyway, hopefully the administration keeps putting pressure on Ukraine and Europe and escalates the pressure, increases the pressure. This war is so fucking stupid. We should be getting along with Russia. We shouldn't be adversaries. We are pushing Russia into the arms of the Chinese unnecessarily over a country that's not even that strategically important to the United States, but is strategically important for Russia. So the whole thing's it's a mess. It's a mess. Probably worse than Jeb Bush. A mess. So anyway, hopefully we see a peace deal by Christmas. I'm not optimistic. I haven't been optimistic, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. We'll be back tomorrow. Again, please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, plus many other podcast platforms that it should be available on. I would really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. Bye-bye.